The alien queen's screams pierced through the thick walls of the medical bay aboard the Terran research vessel Aurora. Her child lay motionless on the examination table, strange purple veins spreading across his small blue-tinted skin like poison threading through water. The Zephyrian medical team stood frozen around the table, their elongated fingers trembling as they watched their technology fail. "We cannot help him," the lead Zephyrian physician whispered to Queen Lara, his voice barely audible through the translation device. "The toxin is unknown to our systems. Our scanners show nothing. Our medicines do nothing." Queen Lara collapsed beside her son's bed, her regal composure shattered. The crown that had sat perfectly on her head for 20 years now hung crooked, forgotten in her despair. Prince Kael was only 8 years old, barely past his first molt. The thought of losing him made her chest feel hollow. Captain Danny Martinez stood in the corner watching the scene unfold with growing frustration. He had commanded this research mission to establish peaceful relations with the Zephyrian Empire. Everything had been going perfectly until the prince suddenly collapsed during the welcome ceremony 3 hours ago. "There has to be something we can do," Martinez muttered to his first officer, Lisa Young. "We brought their royal family aboard our ship. If the prince dies here, it will look like we poisoned him." Lisa nodded grimly. "The Zephyrians might see it as an act of war. Our entire colony expansion program could collapse." In the ship's engineering deck, Jake Coleman was elbow-deep in the quantum drive's coolant system when his communicator crackled to life. The 28-year-old engineer had been working non-stop for 16 hours, trying to optimize their power output for the long journey home. "Coleman, report to Medical Bay immediately," came Captain Martinez's urgent voice. Jake wiped his hands on a rag and frowned. He was an engineer, not a doctor. What could they possibly need him for? He made his way through the ship's corridors, noting the unusual tension in the air. Crew members whispered in small groups, their faces grave. When the medical bay doors slid open, Jake stopped dead in his tracks. The alien child on the table looked like he was dying. The queen knelt beside him, making soft sounds that needed no translation. Pain was universal. "Coleman, good," Captain Martinez said, approaching him quickly. "We need your expertise." "Sir, I'm not a medical officer," Jake said, confused. "I fix engines and power systems. Look at this." Dr. Helen Park, the ship's chief medical officer, called him over to her scanner display. "The toxin in the prince's system is unlike anything we've seen. But there's something strange about it." Jake studied the readout, his engineer's mind automatically analyzing the patterns. "This looks almost like an energy signature," he said slowly. "Not biological at all." "Exactly," Dr. Park nodded. "Our medical sensors can't lock onto it because it's not registering as a toxin. It's registering as some kind of quantum interference." Jake's pulse quickened as understanding dawned. "You think this is technology, not poison?" "We need someone who understands quantum mechanics and energy systems," Captain Martinez said. "Every second counts." Jake approached the examination table cautiously. The prince's breathing was shallow, his small chest barely rising and falling. The purple veins had spread further since he'd entered the room. "Can I run some scans with my engineering equipment?" Jake asked Dr. Park. She nodded quickly. "Try anything." Jake retrieved his quantum scanner from his toolkit. It was designed to detect energy fluctuations in Starship systems, but maybe it could help here. As he ran the device over the prince's body, his eyes widened. "There," he said, pointing to a reading on his screen. "There's a quantum signature embedded in his cellular matrix. It's artificial." Queen Lyra looked up at him with desperate eyes. Even without understanding his words, she seemed to sense hope in his voice. "Can you remove it, Doctor?" Park asked. Jake studied the readings more carefully. "It's like a quantum virus. It's rewriting the prince's cellular energy patterns. But if I can isolate the frequency..." He trailed off, his mind racing through possibilities. "Jake," Captain Martinez said urgently, "whatever you're thinking, do it fast. His vital signs are dropping." Jake's hands moved quickly over his scanner controls. Years of working with quantum systems had taught him to think in frequencies and wave patterns. If this was technology masquerading as biology, then maybe he could treat it like any other system malfunction. I need to modify my quantum disruptor, he said, already pulling components from his toolkit. If I can match the exact frequency of this interference and reverse its polarity, his fingers worked with practiced speed, rewiring circuits and adjusting calibrations. The room fell silent except for the soft beeping of the medical monitors. Queen Lyra watched this human engineer work with an intensity that made Jake's hands shake slightly. He had never felt pressure like this before. One mistake could kill the prince and potentially start an interstellar war. "Ready," Jake announced, holding up the modified disruptor. It was roughly the size of a medical scanner, but its purpose was entirely different. "Will this hurt him?" Queen Lyra asked in halting English. Jake met her eyes honestly. "I don't know, but without treatment he won't survive another hour." The Queen looked at her dying son, then back at Jake. After a moment that felt like eternity, she nodded. Jake positioned the device over the prince's chest and activated it. The machine hummed softly, and immediately the readings on his scanner began to change. The purple veins started to fade. Part 2, Prince Kael's eyes fluttered open as the last traces of purple disappeared from his skin. The medical monitors around him began beeping with stronger, more regular rhythms. Queen Lyra gasped and reached for her son's hand, tears streaming down her angular face. "Mom," the prince whispered in his native language, his voice weak but clear. Jake stepped back from the examination table, his legs suddenly shaky from the adrenaline crash. The quantum disruptor was still humming in his hands, but the readings showed normal energy patterns throughout the prince's body. "It worked," Dr. Crusoe Park breathed, checking her medical scanners. "All signs of the quantum interference are gone. His cellular structure is returning to normal." Captain Martinez placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. "Outstanding work, Coleman. How did you know that would work?" Jake set down the disruptor and ran his fingers through his hair. "Honestly, sir, I wasn't completely sure. But the frequency pattern looked similar to a quantum virus we encountered in the ship's computer systems last year. I figured if it could infect biological systems the same way it infected our digital ones, maybe the same solution would work." Queen Lyra stood slowly, never taking her eyes off her son. Prince Kael was sitting up now, color returning to his cheeks. The resemblance between mother and child was striking, both sharing the same bright silver eyes and delicate bone structure typical of their species. "How is this possible?" she asked, turning to face Jake. "How did a human engineer succeed where our best physicians failed?" "Different perspective, maybe," Jake replied modestly. "Your medical team was looking for a biological solution to what they thought was a biological problem. I saw it as a technical malfunction." The Zephyrian lead physician approached Jake with obvious curiosity. "This quantum virus, as you call it, have you encountered such things before?" "A few times," Jake nodded. "Usually in ship systems. They're designed to destabilize quantum matrices. I've never seen one target living tissue before." "But who would create such a weapon?" Queen Lyra asked, her voice taking on a harder edge as the relief of her son's recovery gave way to anger. Captain Martinez exchanged glances with his senior staff. This was the question they had all been avoiding. If someone had deliberately targeted the Zephyrian Prince with this quantum virus, it had political implications that went far beyond medicine. "Your Majesty," Martinez said carefully, "do you have any enemies who might have access to this kind of technology?" Queen Lyra's expression darkened. "The hegemony," she said without hesitation. "They have been trying to prevent our alliance with humanity for months. They see your species as a threat to their power in this sector." Jake frowned. "The hegemony has quantum weapons?" "They have been stealing and reverse engineering technology from dozens of species for centuries," the Queen replied. "If anyone could create something like this, it would be them." Dr. Park was still running scans on Prince Kael, but she looked up at this news. "The timing does seem suspicious. The prince was fine until halfway through the welcome ceremony." Someone at the ceremony, Lisa Young realized. Someone who had access to the prince. Queen Lyra's silver eyes flashed with fury. "The diplomatic delegation from the outer colonies. They arrived just before the ceremony began. I thought it was strange that they wanted to attend, since they had previously opposed our negotiations with humanity. Captain Martinez activated his communicator. Security, I need a full scan of all guests who attended today's ceremony. Look for any unusual energy signatures or quantum residue. While the security team began their investigation, Jake found himself studying Prince Kael more closely. The boy seemed fully recovered, but something about the nature of the attack bothered him. "Your Majesty," he said to Queen Lyra, "has your son shown any unusual abilities since his recovery?" The Queen looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "Quantum viruses sometimes leave residual changes in their targets," Jake explained. "Usually harmless, but sometimes they can enhance certain natural abilities." As if responding to Jake's words, Prince Kael suddenly sat up straighter. His silver eyes seemed to shimmer for a moment, and the lights in the medical bay flickered. "Interesting," Dr. Park murmured, checking her readings. "I'm detecting unusual neural activity in his temporal lobe." "Kael," Queen Lara said gently to her son, "how do you feel?" The young prince looked around the room with wide eyes. "Everything looks different, Mom. I can see the energy patterns in the ship's walls, and I can hear the quantum drive humming 3 decks below us." Jake's eyebrows shot up. "That's impossible. The quantum drive is heavily shielded." "Not impossible," Dr. Park said, studying her scanner readings. "It looks like the quantum virus has somehow enhanced his natural sensory capabilities. He's perceiving quantum energy directly." "Is this permanent?" Queen Lyra asked, concern creeping into her voice. "I don't know," Jake admitted. "We'll need to monitor him carefully," Captain Martinez's communicator crackled. "Sir, we found something. 3 members of the Outer Colony delegation are carrying quantum transmitters. Small ones, barely detectable." "Arrest them!" Martinez ordered immediately. "Already done, sir." "But there's something else. The transmitters were set to activate at specific quantum frequencies. It looks like they were designed to trigger the virus remotely." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "They were using the prince as a weapon." "What do you mean?" Queen Liara demanded. "Think about it," Jake said, his mind racing. "They infected your son with a quantum virus, then planned to trigger it remotely while he was aboard our ship. If he had died here, it would have looked like humans killed him," the Queen finished, her voice filled with horror. "They wanted to destroy our alliance and make it look like we betrayed each other. But their plan failed because they didn't expect a human engineer to recognize quantum technology," Captain Martinez observed. Prince Kael suddenly spoke up, his young voice carrying an odd authority. "They're not done yet. I can sense 3 more quantum transmitters somewhere on this ship." Everyone turned to stare at the boy. His enhanced senses were apparently even more powerful than they had realized. "Where?" Jake asked urgently. The prince closed his eyes in concentration. "One is near the engine room. One is in the communications center. And one is..." His eyes snapped open in alarm. "One is in the bridge right next to the navigation controls." Captain Martinez was already moving. "Security teams to all 3 locations. If those transmitters are quantum bombs, they could destabilize our entire ship," Jake finished grimly. As alarm klaxons began sounding throughout the Aurora, Jake realized their troubles were just beginning. Part 3. The Aurora's corridors filled with running crew members as security teams rushed toward the 3 locations Prince Kael had identified. Jake grabbed his quantum scanner and headed for the engine room, while Captain Martinez coordinated the search from the medical bay. "I'm coming with you," Prince Kael announced, jumping down from the examination table. "Absolutely not," Queen Lyra said firmly. "You just recovered from near death." "But I can sense the quantum signatures," the prince protested. "I can help find them faster." Jake paused at the medical bay door. The boy had a point. His enhanced senses could save precious time, and if these devices were quantum bombs, every second mattered. "He's right," Jake said to the Queen. "If we're dealing with multiple quantum devices, his abilities could make the difference between finding them and losing the ship." Queen Lyra looked torn between protecting her son and recognizing the logic of the situation. Finally, she stood up decisively. "Then I'm coming too." "Your Majesty, that's not necessary," Captain Martinez began. "My son nearly died because someone wanted to use him as a weapon against your people," she replied coldly. I will not hide in safety while others risk their lives to clean up this mess. Jake nodded respectfully. Then let's go. Prince, can you still sense the device in the engine room? The young Zephyrian closed his eyes briefly, then pointed down the corridor. That way. It's getting stronger. They moved quickly through the ship's passages, with Jake leading the way and Prince Kael providing direction. Behind them, Queen Lyra moved with the fluid grace of her species, her earlier despair replaced by cold determination. How long have these quantum viruses been a problem? She asked Jake as they walked. We first encountered them about 2 years ago, Jake replied. They started showing up in computer systems across human space. We figured out how to counter them, but this is the first time I've seen one used on a living being. The hegemony has been testing biological applications for months, the Queen said grimly. We intercepted some of their research data, but we thought it was too dangerous for them to actually use. Prince Kael suddenly stopped walking. The signal is much stronger now. It's just ahead. They rounded a corner and entered the main engine room. The massive quantum drive hummed at the center of the space, surrounded by monitoring stations and maintenance platforms. Jake immediately began scanning with his equipment. There. Prince Kael pointed to a section of wall near the primary coolant lines. It's behind that panel. Jake quickly removed the panel and found a small device attached to the coolant system. It was barely larger than his thumb, but his scanner showed it was generating enormous quantum instability. This isn't just a bomb, he realized with growing horror. It's designed to overload our quantum drive. If it activates, it could create a cascade failure that destroys everything within a light-year radius. Queen Liara's face went pale, including both our fleets in orbit. Jake's hands moved quickly over the device, studying its construction. It's more sophisticated than anything I've seen before. The trigger mechanism is tied to a quantum entanglement field. If I try to remove it the wrong way, it could detonate immediately. Can you disarm it? The Queen asked. Maybe, but I need more time to study the design. Jake looked at Prince Kael. Can you sense how many more of these are on the ship? The prince concentrated again. 5 total. We found 1. There are still 4 more. 5? Jake felt his stomach drop. That's enough to destroy half the solar system. Captain Martinez's voice crackled over the communicator. Coleman, we found the device on the bridge. Our technical team is afraid to touch it. Don't let anyone near it until I get there, Jake replied urgently. These aren't just bombs. They're designed to create quantum cascade failures. Understood. We've also identified the saboteurs from the Outer Colony delegation. They're definitely working for the hegemony. Queen Lara moved closer to Jake as he worked on the device. Is there anything I can do to help? Actually, yes, Jake said, looking up at her. Your people understand quantum mechanics differently than humans do. We approach it as engineering. How do your species view quantum fields? The Queen considered this. We see them as living systems. Energy that flows and responds to consciousness, rather than just following physical laws. Interesting. Jake studied the device again. What if this isn't purely mechanical? What if it requires some kind of conscious trigger? Prince Kael suddenly grabbed his mother's arm. Mom, I can feel something. The devices are communicating with each other. What do you mean? Jake asked. They're connected somehow. When one activates, they all activate together. The prince's enhanced senses were picking up quantum patterns invisible to normal perception. Jake's mind raced. That means we can't disarm them one at a time. We have to shut down the entire network simultaneously. How is that possible? Queen Lara asked. It might not be, Jake admitted. Unless... He looked at Prince Kael thoughtfully. Your enhanced quantum perception. Can you feel the exact frequency they're using to communicate? The prince nodded slowly. It's like a song, but made of energy instead of sound. If we can disrupt that frequency, we might be able to sever their connection, Jake realized. But I would need to modify my quantum disruptor to broadcast on multiple channels simultaneously. How long would that take? Queen Liara asked. Jake looked at his equipment, mentally calculating the modifications needed. 20 minutes, maybe 30. Captain Martinez's voice came over the communicator again. Coleman, We have a problem. Long-range sensors are picking up hegemony ships approaching our position. They'll be here in 15 minutes. Jake felt the walls closing in around them. 50 minutes to disable 5 quantum bombs before an enemy fleet arrived. The odds were not in their favor. There has to be another way, he muttered, studying the device again. Prince Kael was standing very still, his eyes closed in concentration. Jake, he said quietly, what if we don't need to disarm them? What do you mean? The young prince opened his silver eyes, and they seemed to glow with inner light. What if we can turn them into something else? Queen Liara stared at her son in amazement. Kael, what are you thinking? The quantum virus changed how I see energy, the prince explained. These bombs aren't just weapons. They're energy storage devices. All that power they're gathering to create destruction. What if we could redirect it? Jake's eyes widened as he understood. You want to turn the bombs into a defensive system? Can we do that? Queen Liara asked. Jake was already pulling out his tools. It's crazy enough that it might work, but I'll need both of you to help me. As the hegemony fleet drew closer and time ran short, the unlikely team began their desperate race against disaster. Part 4, Jake's modified quantum disruptor hummed with unstable energy as he made the final connections. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool temperature in the engine room. They had 12 minutes before the hegemony fleet arrived, and the quantum bombs were still active throughout the ship. Prince Kael, Jake said without looking up from his work, I need you to help me map the exact quantum frequencies of all 5 devices. Can you sense them individually? The young Zephyrian pressed his palms against the ship's wall, his enhanced senses reaching out through the Aurora's hull. Each one has a slightly different resonance pattern. It's like they're singing in harmony. Perfect. I'm going to need those exact frequencies to retune them. Jake's fingers danced over his equipment controls. Your Majesty, I need you to help me understand how your people manipulate quantum fields. Queen Liara knelt beside him. Our technology is based on consciousness interaction with quantum states. We don't force energy to obey us. We convince it to work with us. That's the opposite of human engineering, Jake realized. We impose our will on matter and energy. You negotiate with it. The quantum virus in your son may have created a bridge between our 2 approaches, Jake continued. A new idea forming. He can perceive quantum fields like a Zephyrian, but his exposure to human technology might let him interface with our systems directly. Prince Kael's eyes lit up with understanding. You want me to talk to the bombs? Not exactly, Jake replied, still working frantically on his modifications. I want you to convince them to change their purpose. Instead of creating destructive cascade failures, we need them to generate defensive quantum barriers. Captain Martinez's voice crackled over the communicator. All teams report. Status on the quantum devices? Still working on it, sir, Jake replied. How long until the hegemony fleet arrives? 10 minutes. And Jake, our long-range communications are being jammed. We can't call for backup. Queen Liara stood up, her expression hardening. The hegemony wants no witnesses to their plan. They intend to destroy your ship and blame it on a quantum drive malfunction. Then we'll surprise them, Jake said grimly. He held up his modified disruptor. This should be able to interface with all 5 devices simultaneously, but I'll need Prince Kael to guide the quantum restructuring process. Is it dangerous? Queen Lara asked, looking at her son with concern. Everything we're doing right now is dangerous, Jake replied honestly. But if we succeed, those bombs will become the strongest defensive shields ever created. Prince Kael stepped forward bravely. Tell me what to do. Jake handed him a modified headset connected to his equipment. This will amplify your quantum perception and let you direct the energy flows. When I activate the disruptor, you'll need to guide the quantum restructuring process for all 5 devices at once. All 5 at once? The prince looked slightly overwhelmed. I know it sounds impossible, Jake said gently, but your enhanced abilities make you the only person who can do this. You can perceive quantum patterns that neither humans nor normal Zephyrians can see. Queen Lyra placed a comforting hand on her son's shoulder. You saved yourself from the quantum virus. Now you can save everyone else. The prince nodded, with determination beyond his years. I'm ready. Jake activated his equipment, and immediately the ship's lights flickered as massive amounts of energy began flowing through the modified systems. The quantum disruptor created a connection to all 5 devices simultaneously, their individual frequencies merging into a complex harmonic pattern that made the air itself seem to vibrate. "Now," Jake said urgently, "guide them to defensive configurations." Prince Kael closed his eyes and reached out with his enhanced senses. Through the headset he could feel the quantum bombs throughout the ship like points of brilliant light in his mind. Each one contained enough energy to level a city. All of it focused on destruction. "I can feel them," he whispered. "They're so angry. The energy wants to explode outward, to tear everything apart." "Don't fight that impulse," Queen Lyra advised, remembering her people's approach to quantum manipulation. "Acknowledge it, then show it a different path." The prince's breathing deepened as he concentrated. In his quantum-enhanced perception, he began to speak to the furious energy contained in the bombs. He didn't try to suppress their power. Instead, he offered them a new purpose. Instead of destroying, they could protect. Instead of tearing apart, they could hold together. Instead of bringing death, they could preserve life. One by one, the quantum signatures began to change. The destructive resonance patterns shifted into protective harmonics. Jake watched his readings with amazement as the bombs transformed into something entirely new. "It's working," he breathed. "The quantum matrices are restructuring themselves into barrier generators." Captain Martinez's voice came over the communicator with new urgency. "Hegemony ships are dropping out of hyperspace. 6 heavy cruisers and a dreadnought. They're powering weapons and moving to attack formation." "How long until they're in weapons range?" Jake asked, still monitoring the quantum transformation process. 3 minutes. Prince Kael suddenly opened his eyes, which were now glowing with silver light. "It's done. All 5 devices have been converted." Jake checked his readings and felt a surge of triumph. "Quantum barrier generators are online and responding to ship's control." "We actually did it!" Queen Liara hugged her son proudly. "You've saved both our peoples." "Not yet," Jake said, gathering up his equipment. "We need to get to the bridge and coordinate the barrier activation with the ship's defense systems." They ran through the corridors toward the bridge as the Aurora shook under the first hegemony energy blasts. The enemy fleet had opened fire, their weapons designed to overwhelm conventional shields and destroy the supposedly helpless research vessel. "Bridge in sight," Jake called out as they rounded the final corner. Captain Martinez looked up as they burst onto the bridge. "Please tell me you have good news." "The best," Jake replied, moving quickly to the engineering station. "We've converted all 5 quantum bombs into barrier generators. They're tied into ship's power and ready for activation." "Barriers up," Martinez ordered immediately. Jake's fingers flew over the controls, bringing the improvised defense system online. Around the Aurora, quantum energy barriers sprang to life, creating a protective shell that sparkled with silver light. The hegemony weapons fire struck the barriers and simply vanished, absorbed harmlessly into the quantum matrix. "Impossible," came a transmission from the hegemony flagship. "No human technology can withstand our firepower." Captain Martinez smiled grimly as he opened a channel. "You're right. This isn't human technology. It's something better. It's cooperation." On the main screen, the hegemony fleet continued their futile bombardment, while the Aurora sat safely protected by barriers created from their own weapons. But Jake could see from his readings that the barriers were consuming enormous amounts of power. They had bought time, but the real battle was just beginning. Part 5, the Aurora's quantum barriers held firm against the hegemony bombardment, but Jake could see the power drain indicators climbing rapidly on his engineering console. The converted bombs were incredibly efficient as defensive systems, but they were still consuming energy at an unsustainable rate. "Captain," Jake reported, "the barriers are holding, but we're drawing power directly from the quantum drive. At this rate, we'll exhaust our energy reserves in 20 minutes. Captain Martinez studied the tactical display showing the 7 hegemony ships maintaining their attack formation around the Aurora. "Can we extend that time?" "Not significantly," Jake replied, "unless we can find an external power source." Prince Kael, who was still wearing the quantum interface headset, suddenly spoke up. The hegemony ships are generating massive amounts of quantum energy with their weapons. What if we could absorb some of that power? Jake's eyes widened as he understood the implications. You mean turn their own attack energy back against them? The barriers aren't just blocking their weapons, the prince explained, his enhanced senses reading the quantum flows around the ship. They're actually absorbing the energy and converting it to maintain themselves, but we're not capturing all of it. Queen Liara looked between her son and Jake with growing hope. Can we modify the barriers to become more efficient? Jake was already running calculations on his console. It's theoretically possible. If we can tune the quantum absorption frequencies to match the hegemony weapons exactly, we could create a feedback loop. The more they attack us, the stronger our defenses become. How long would that modification take? Captain Martinez asked. With normal equipment, hours, Jake replied. But with Prince Kael's abilities to guide the quantum restructuring, I can do it, the prince said confidently. I can feel how the energy wants to flow. It's like redirecting a river instead of building a dam. The ship shuddered under another massive barrage from the hegemony fleet. On the main screen, they could see the enemy dreadnought moving closer, its weapons charging for what looked like a final devastating attack. Do it, Martinez ordered. We're running out of options anyway. Jake began modifying the barrier control systems while Prince Kael closed his eyes and reached out with his enhanced quantum perception. Through the headset connection, he could feel the massive energies flowing around their ship. The hegemony weapons were like fires trying to burn through their defenses, but the barriers were like water, absorbing and redirecting the heat. I need to change how the barriers interact with incoming energy, the prince said softly. Instead of just absorbing it, they need to learn from it. Learn from it? Jake asked while continuing his modifications. Each weapon has a unique quantum signature, Prince Kael explained. If the barriers can adapt to match those signatures exactly, they can absorb the energy more efficiently and even redirect it back at the attackers. Queen Lara watched her son with amazement and pride. The quantum virus didn't just enhance your senses, it gave you an intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics that neither humans nor our people possess naturally. The modification is ready, Jake announced. Prince, whenever you're prepared. The young Zephyrian took a deep breath and expanded his quantum awareness to encompass all 5 barrier generators simultaneously. He could feel the angry energy of the hegemony weapons hammering against their defenses, and instead of fighting it, the barriers started to shimmer and change, their quantum frequencies shifting to match the incoming weapon signatures. Almost immediately, the power drain readings on Jake's console began to improve. It's working, Jake said excitedly. Power consumption is dropping and barrier strength is actually increasing on the main screen. They watched as the hegemony dreadnought fired its primary weapon, a massive beam designed to vaporize enemy ships instantly. But when the beam struck their barriers, something unexpected happened. The barriers absorbed the energy completely, then reflected it back at the dreadnought with twice the original power. The hegemony flagship's own weapon blast struck its forward shields, causing massive damage and forcing the ship to retreat. Impossible, came another transmission from the hegemony fleet commander. How are you reflecting our own weapons back at us? Captain Martinez opened a channel with a satisfied smile. It turns out your quantum bombs made excellent defensive systems once we convinced them to change sides. There was a long pause before the hegemony commander responded. You converted our weapons? Actually, Prince Kael said, speaking into the communication system. I asked them nicely to help protect instead of destroy. They agreed. Jake could see the confusion and growing fear in the enemy fleet's formation as they realized their own weapons were now useless against the Aurora. Every attack only made their targets stronger. This is Admiral Vex of the Hegemony Third Fleet, came a new transmission. You will surrender immediately and submit to boarding. Your ship contains stolen hegemony technology. Actually, Queen Lara said, stepping forward to the communication console, your technology chose to defect, and as ruler of the Zephyrian Empire, I formally charge you with attempted murder and acts of war against both my people and humanity. Your charges are meaningless, Admiral Vex replied coldly. We will destroy your ship and claim your technology. You're welcome to try, Captain Martinez said calmly. But I should mention that our quantum barriers are still learning. Every attack you make teaches them how to defend better against your specific weapons. Jake watched his readouts with fascination as the barriers continued to evolve. Prince Kael's quantum-enhanced consciousness was allowing the defensive systems to adapt in real time, becoming more efficient with each enemy attack. "Sir," reported Lisa Young from the tactical station, "the barriers are now generating excess power. We're actually gaining energy from their attacks." "Then let's put that energy to good use," Martinez decided. "Jake, can we redirect some of that power to our engines and weapons?" "Already working on it," Jake replied. His fingers flew over the engineering controls as he began routing the absorbed energy into the ship's other systems. "We'll have full power restored in 2 minutes. Prince Kael suddenly opened his glowing eyes with alarm. "Captain, the hegemony ships are changing their attack pattern. They're going to try something different." On the tactical display, the enemy fleet was spreading out into a wider formation, their weapons charging for what looked like a coordinated strike from multiple directions. "They're planning to overwhelm the barriers with simultaneous attacks from different angles," Jake realized. "Can the barriers handle that?" Queen Liara asked. "Only one way to find out," Prince Kael said grimly, his hands tightening on the quantum interface controls. As the hegemony fleet prepared their coordinated assault, the unlikely alliance of human engineering and Zephyrian quantum consciousness prepared to face their greatest test yet. Part 6. The 7 hegemony ships moved into perfect attack formation, surrounding the Aurora in a sphere of deadly intent. Admiral Vex's voice crackled over the communication channel with cold satisfaction. "Your adaptive barriers may handle attacks from one direction, but let's see how they perform against simultaneous bombardment from 7 different vectors. All ships, prepare for coordinated strike on my mark." Captain Martinez looked at his crew with grim determination. "This is it, people. Everything depends on our improvised defenses holding." Prince Kael, still connected to the quantum barrier system through his headset, could sense the massive energy buildup from all 7 enemy ships. His enhanced perception showed him the attack pattern forming like a deadly flower of light preparing to bloom around their vessel. "They're right about one thing," the prince said quietly. "The barriers were designed to adapt to individual weapon signatures. 7 different weapons firing simultaneously from different angles is going to be much harder to counter." Jake studied his engineering readouts frantically. "Can you extend your control to handle multiple threat vectors at once?" "I don't know," Prince Kael admitted. "I've never tried anything this complex before." Queen Liara moved to stand behind her son, placing her hands gently on his shoulders. "You don't have to do this alone. Our people have techniques for sharing quantum consciousness. If you're willing to let me help, Mom, it could be dangerous," the prince warned. "The quantum virus changed how my brain works. If you try to link with me directly, it might affect you too." "That's a risk I'm willing to take," Queen Lyra replied firmly. "I will not stand by and watch while my child faces this alone." Jake looked between them with sudden understanding. "You're talking about creating a shared quantum consciousness? 2 minds controlling the barrier system together?" "It's theoretically possible," the Queen explained. "Zephyrian mated pairs sometimes share quantum awareness during deep space navigation, but I don't know if it will work with the human technology integration." "All ships, weapons at maximum charge," Admiral Vex announced over the communication system. "Target the human vessel. Fire in 3, 2, do it now," Captain Martinez ordered urgently. Queen Liara pressed her forehead against her son's, and immediately the bridge lights flickered as their quantum consciousness began to merge. The headset Jake had created suddenly blazed with silver energy as 2 Zephyrian minds linked together and reached out to control the defensive barriers. 1. Fire. 7 massive energy beams lanced out from the hegemony ships, converging on the Aurora from every direction. The quantum barriers flared to life with unprecedented intensity, no longer the simple protective shell they had been before. Under the combined control of Prince Kael and Queen Lyra, the barriers became something entirely new. Instead of a static defense, they transformed into a dynamic system that actively moved and adapted to each incoming threat. Jake watched his readouts in amazement as the barriers split into multiple layers, each one tuned to a different weapon signature. The first layer absorbed the initial attack energy, the second layer analyzed and redirected it, and the third layer reflected it back at the attackers with amplified power. "Incredible," he breathed. They've turned our defense system into a quantum mirror array. The reflected weapon beams struck the hegemony ships with devastating effect. 3 of the heavy cruisers lost their forward shields entirely, and the dreadnought was forced to retreat as its own primary weapon blast overwhelmed its defensive systems. Impossible! Admiral Vex snarled over the communication channel. No defense can be perfect. All ships, continuous bombardment, overwhelm their barriers with sustained fire. The enemy fleet opened up with everything they had, pouring energy into the Aurora's position in a desperate attempt to penetrate the adaptive defenses. But with each attack, the quantum barriers learned more, adapted faster, and reflected more energy back at their attackers. "Captain," Jake reported with growing excitement, "we're not just surviving their attack, we're winning. The barriers are generating so much excess energy that we could power a small city." "Then let's even the odds," Martinez decided. "Lisa, bring our weapons online. Route the excess barrier energy into the main guns." "Weapons powered and ready," Lisa Young reported. "We have enough charge for full offensive capability." Prince Kael and Queen Liara, their minds still linked in quantum consciousness, suddenly spoke in perfect unison. "The enemy fleet is beginning to show structural damage from their own reflected weapons. Their ships were not designed to withstand their own firepower." "Admiral Vex," Captain Martinez said, opening a channel to the Hegemony flagship. "You have one chance to surrender. Call off your attack and withdraw your forces." "Never," came the furious reply. "The Hegemony does not retreat from inferior species." "Your choice," Martinez said sadly. Then, to his crew, "All weapons, target the dreadnought. Let's end this." The Aurora's main guns fired, powered by energy absorbed from the Hegemony's own weapons. The beam that struck the enemy flagship was unlike anything in standard human armaments. Enhanced by Zephyrian quantum consciousness and powered by converted weapon energy, it cut through the dreadnought's shields like they weren't even there. The massive Hegemony ship began to list heavily, its engines failing and atmosphere venting into space. "All ships, retreat," Admiral Vex ordered desperately. "Fall back to minimum safe distance." But as the surviving Hegemony vessels tried to withdraw, they discovered another surprise. The Aurora's quantum barriers had extended their influence beyond the immediate area around the ship. The reflected weapon energy had created quantum distortions throughout the local space that interfered with hyperspace navigation. "We can't jump to hyperspace," came panicked transmissions from the enemy fleet. "Something is disrupting our drive systems." Jake smiled as he realized what had happened. The quantum barriers didn't just reflect their weapons. They've created a localized quantum field that prevents hyperspace jumps. The Hegemony fleet is trapped here with us. Prince Kael and Queen Liara slowly separated their linked consciousness, both looking exhausted but triumphant. The prince's eyes had returned to their normal silver color, though they still held an inner light that hadn't been there before. "The barriers are stable now," the prince reported. "They'll maintain themselves automatically and continue to adapt to any new threats." "Outstanding work, both of you," Captain Martinez said gratefully. "You've not only saved our ship, but potentially prevented a war between our species." Queen Liara looked at her son with immense pride. "You've grown so much in just one day. The quantum virus that nearly killed you has made you into something remarkable." "I couldn't have done it without Jake's engineering," Prince Kael replied modestly. "And without Mom's help, I never would have been able to handle 7 attacks at once." Jake was studying his long-range sensors when he noticed something that made him smile. "Your Majesty, Captain, you might want to see this. We have company." On the main screen, dozens of ships were dropping out of hyperspace around their position. The joint human Zephyrian rescue fleet had finally arrived, just in time to witness the aftermath of the battle. "This is Admiral Sarah Reynolds commanding the Combined Task Force," came a transmission. "Aurora, please report your status. This is Captain Martinez. All hands safe and secure. The Hegemony threat has been neutralized, and we have some very interesting new technology to show you." As the rescue fleet moved to surround the damaged Hegemony ships, Jake couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in just a few hours. They had started the day with a simple diplomatic mission and ended it with a revolutionary breakthrough in defensive technology. But the most important change wasn't technological. It was the bond that had formed between species, proven in the crucible of desperate cooperation against a common enemy. Part 7. 3 hours after the battle ended, the Aurora's main conference room had been transformed into an impromptu war council. Representatives from both the human and Zephyrian fleets filled the space, studying the tactical recordings of the quantum barrier system in action. Admiral Sarah Reynolds, a stern woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, reviewed the battle data with obvious amazement. "I've reviewed these recordings 3 times, and I still find it hard to believe. You converted quantum bombs into defensive barriers that actually grew stronger under attack?" Jake nodded from his position at the engineering station he had set up in the corner. The key was Prince Kael's enhanced quantum perception. Without his ability to guide the energy restructuring process, this never would have worked. Prince Kael sat between his mother and Jake, looking much younger than his actions had suggested during the crisis. The quantum enhancement from the virus had stabilized, leaving him with permanently enhanced senses but without the dangerous instability of the initial infection. The real breakthrough wasn't just defensive, Queen Liara added. "The shared quantum consciousness my son and I achieved represents a new level of cooperation between our species. We literally shared thoughts and perceptions to control the barrier system together." Admiral Reynolds studied the young prince with professional interest. "Can this quantum enhancement be replicated safely in other subjects?" "I don't recommend trying," Dr. Helen Park interjected from her seat at the medical station. "The prince survived the quantum virus because of his unique physiology and age. Attempting to replicate the process deliberately could be fatal. But the principles behind the technology can be adapted," Jake said, pulling up holographic displays of the barrier system schematics. "We don't need quantum-enhanced individuals to build these defensive systems. We just need to understand how consciousness can interface with quantum fields." Fleet Admiral Marcus Stone, the senior human commander, leaned forward with interest. "Are you saying this technology could be installed on other ships?" "More than that," Jake replied excitedly. "This could revolutionize space defense for both our species. Instead of building massive weapons to fight each other, we could create adaptive barriers that make warfare essentially obsolete." "An interesting concept," Admiral Reynolds said thoughtfully. "But what about the hegemony threat? They won't give up after one defeat." Queen Lara's expression hardened. "The hegemony has been expanding aggressive for centuries, conquering or destroying any species that refused to submit to their rule. Today's victory was significant, but they command hundreds of ships across dozens of systems. However," she continued, "we've proven that cooperation between our species can achieve things neither of us could accomplish alone. Perhaps it's time to consider a formal alliance." Captain Martinez looked up from the tactical displays. "A defensive alliance built around this new barrier technology could provide security for both our peoples." Jake was studying the quantum field readings when he noticed something unusual. "Prince Kael, are you still sensing quantum signatures from the hegemony ships?" The young prince closed his eyes briefly, extending his enhanced perception. "Yes, but something's different about them. Their quantum drives are changing." "Changing how?" Admiral Reynolds asked with concern. "It's like they're trying to adapt to the quantum field distortions we created," Prince Kael explained. "Their ship's computer systems are learning from our barriers the same way our barriers learn from their weapons." Jake felt a chill of realization. Of course, quantum systems naturally tend toward equilibrium. The hegemony ships have been exposed to our adaptive technology for hours now. Their own systems are beginning to evolve in response. "Is that dangerous?" Queen Liara asked. "Not immediately," Jake replied, checking his readings carefully. "But it means the hegemony will eventually develop countermeasures. They'll study what happened here and find ways to overcome adaptive barriers. Then we need to stay ahead of them," Admiral Stone decided. "Jake, how quickly can we begin installing these barrier systems on other ships? With proper support and resources, we could have prototype systems ready for testing within a month," Jake estimated. "But we'll need continued cooperation with Zephyrian quantum specialists to make them fully effective." Prince Kael suddenly stood up, his enhanced senses detecting something new. "Admiral Reynolds, I'm picking up a transmission from the hegemony dreadnought. but it's not being broadcast on normal frequencies. It's embedded in quantum background radiation. Can you decode it? She asked. The prince concentrated, his consciousness reaching out to interpret the quantum-encoded message. After a moment, his eyes widened with alarm. It's a report to the Hegemony Central Command, he translated. Admiral Vex is describing our adaptive barrier technology and recommending immediate development of countersystems. But there's more. He's also reporting the location of our home worlds and fleet positions. How much information does he have? Admiral Stone demanded. Everything, Prince Kael replied grimly. Ship positions, technological capabilities, even the location of our diplomatic meetings. The Hegemony has been gathering intelligence for months. Jake looked at the tactical displays with new understanding. This wasn't just an attack on our alliance negotiations. This was a reconnaissance mission. They wanted to test our capabilities and gather information for a larger invasion. Then we need to move quickly, Queen Liara said, standing decisively. If the Hegemony is planning a full-scale assault, both our peoples need to be prepared. Admiral Reynolds nodded grimly. I'm authorizing immediate emergency protocols. All human colonies will be placed on high alert and will begin crash production of the barrier defense systems. The Zephyrian fleet will coordinate with your forces, Queen Liara added. We'll share our quantum technology specialists and provide support for rapid deployment of the new defensive systems. Jake looked around the room at the representatives of two species who had barely known each other a day ago and were now planning integrated defense of their civilizations. There's something else we should consider, he said thoughtfully. Prince Kael's quantum enhancement isn't just useful for controlling barrier systems. His ability to perceive quantum communications could give us a significant intelligence advantage. You mean spying on Hegemony transmissions? The prince asked. More than that, Jake explained. If you can detect their quantum communications, you might be able to interfere with them. Imagine if we could disrupt Hegemony fleet coordination during a battle. Prince Kael's eyes lit up with understanding, like jamming their radio communications but on a quantum level that they wouldn't be able to detect or counter easily. Exactly, Jake confirmed. Queen Lyra looked at her son with mixed pride and concern. That would put you at the center of any conflict with the Hegemony. Are you prepared for that responsibility? The young prince looked around the room at the adults, who were depending on his unique abilities, then back at his mother. A few hours ago, I nearly died from a quantum virus, designed to start a war between our peoples. Now that same virus has given me the power to help prevent that war. I think that makes the choice pretty clear. Then it's settled, Admiral Reynolds announced. We'll establish a joint command structure to coordinate defense against the Hegemony threat. Jake Coleman will head the Barrier Technology Development Program, and Prince Kael will serve as our quantum communications specialist. As the meeting began to break up into smaller planning groups, Jake found himself standing next to Queen Liara near the conference room windows. Outside, the joint human Zephyrian fleet was already beginning to form integrated patrol formations. Your Majesty, Jake said quietly, I want you to know what an honor it has been to work with you and the prince today. Queen Lyra smiled, and for the first time since her son had collapsed, she looked truly relaxed. The honor has been ours, Jake Coleman. You saved my son's life and potentially prevented a war between our peoples. We all saved each other, Jake replied. That's what cooperation really means. The Queen looked out at the mixed fleet of human and Zephyrian ships working together in space. Yes, she agreed, and I believe that cooperation will be stronger than anything the Hegemony can bring against us. As if to emphasize her point, Prince Kael joined them at the window, his enhanced senses automatically monitoring the quantum signatures of all the ships around them. The barriers are holding perfectly, he reported with satisfaction, and I can sense the crews on both human and Zephyrian ships beginning to work together. Their quantum signatures are harmonizing. Jake smiled as he realized what the prince meant. Even without quantum enhancement, the crews of both species were beginning to synchronize their efforts, creating an efficiency that neither could achieve alone. They had faced disaster and found triumph through cooperation. Now, as they prepared to face the greater threat of the Hegemony, they did so not as separate species, but as allies united by shared purpose and mutual respect. The real victory hadn't been defeating 7 hegemony ships. It had been proving that different species could work together to achieve the impossible. And in the growing darkness of an approaching war, that light of cooperation would be their greatest weapon.